I remember the day my sister, Sloane, finally showed her true colors. It wasn't a slow reveal, it was an explosion triggered by a piece of paper. My father's last will and testament. Up until that point, I truly believed we were close. We had the history, the shared memories, the blood tie. But as they say in these viral stories, sometimes money doesn't just talk. It screams, and it reveals truths you were desperately hoping weren't real. This story isn't just about an inheritance dispute. It's about the moment I realized the person I called family was a calculating stranger. It's about the drastic steps I had to take to protect the legacy my father had truly intended. To understand the scale of the betrayal, you have to understand the inheritance itself. The lake house. It wasn't a mansion, but it was everything. Tucked away on Lake Serenity, it was a place of worn wooden floors, the smell of pine and lake water, and every childhood summer memory we owned. My father, a man of simple means but immense love, had spent his last 2 years there, and I had spent those years with him. Sloane, my older sister, the golden child, was a whirlwind of energy and superficial charm. She lived 500 miles away, chasing promotions, cocktails, and an image of effortless affluence. She'd call, she'd send gifts, she'd promise to visit, but the visits were rare, brief, and always timed around major holidays. While I was feeding Dad, managing his medication, and holding his hand through the long nights, Sloane was posting glamorous selfies from exotic locations. It was a quiet, sacrificial time for me. I put my life on pause to honor my father, and I never regretted it. Dad saw it and he felt it. 3 months after he passed, the lawyer, Mr. Thompson, gathered us in his stuffy, dark wood office. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Sloane was impeccably dressed, all soft smiles and hushed condolences. I was just exhausted. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat and read the will. It was concise and to me beautiful in its simplicity. My father had split his liquid assets 60/40 in favor of Sloane, giving her a substantial immediate cash sum, more than enough to pay off her expensive sports car and put a down payment on a luxury condo. To me, Audrey, he left the lake house and the remaining 40% of the cash assets. The lawyer finished. Sloane gave me a quick, practiced hug. "Oh, Audrey, I'm so happy for you. That house is just perfect for you. You know, you'll be great at keeping up with the yard work and all that old stuff." Her words sounded supportive, but there was a patronizing edge to them, a subtle implication that the house was a burden, a lovely old headache only the quiet, less ambitious sibling could manage. I accepted it. The house was what I wanted. It was Dad. For a few weeks there was peace. I started the painful process of cleaning out Dad's things, painting the boathouse, and just existing in the quiet solitude of the place. I thought the drama was over. I thought the clear, legal distribution of assets had settled everything. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was up to my elbows in paint, the smell of fresh lacquer mixing with the lake air. My phone buzzed. It was Sloane. I wiped my hands and answered, expecting a chatty update about her latest work trip. "Hey Sloane, what's up? I'm finally finishing the boathouse. Looks great." Her voice, usually loud and bright, was unusually soft. Sweet even. Too sweet. It was the tone she used when she wanted a massive favor, and was trying to soften the blow with sugary manipulation. "Oh, Audrey, that's wonderful. Listen, I actually wanted to talk about the house. I know the will. Well, the will is the will, but I've had a lot of time to think about what Dad really intended, you know?" My stomach dropped. I leaned against the paint can. "No, Sloane. I don't know. The will was pretty clear." "Well, yes, legally. But think about it, sweetie. You're so tied to that little area you don't need the capital. I'm building a real life here in the city. David and I, my fiancé David, we need a major investment. We need a legacy that can grow." And then came the cold, shocking core of her intent, delivered with the casual brutality of asking for a glass of water. "So here's what's fair. I want the lake house. I'll give you all the cash from my share, and I'll even throw in an extra 50 grand. You can buy a cute little townhome and I can take the house. It's really the only sensible option. I want my inheritance, Audrey." The words hung in the air. I want my inheritance, Audrey. My inheritance. The house I had effectively earned, the one designated to me by our father, was now a toy she was demanding. I felt a sudden electric surge of clarity. It was like a heavy curtain had been ripped away, and I saw her not as my loving sister, but as a pure, calculating antagonist. The shock wasn't just in the audacity of the demand. It was in the total lack of warmth, history, or familial respect behind it. It was a business transaction, and she was trying to lowball the quiet guy. "Sloan," I managed, my voice suddenly very level, cutting through the paint fumes. "The house is mine. Dad left it to me. And the 50 grand you're offering? That's about 5% of the house's actual market value. That's not a fair trade. That's an insult." Her tone instantly hardened, the sweet facade melting away to expose the impatient entitlement underneath. "Don't be dramatic, Audrey. It's a huge financial liability for you. I'm giving you an out. David and I need this, and honestly, you don't even use the upstairs bedrooms. Think about the family." That was the kicker. The immediate pivot to emotional blackmail. She ended the call quickly, with one last venomous line that sent true shivers down my spine. "Think about the family, Audrey. Because if this gets ugly, I'm not the one who loses." I stood there, the paintbrush hanging uselessly in my hand, the Golden Lake house suddenly feeling like a prison. My sister had just declared war, and she had no idea who she was fighting. The shock had passed, replaced by a cold, protective rage. I had to protect what was mine, and I knew right then my countershock would be devastating. The golden cage had just turned into a battlefield. The moment I hung up on Sloan, the silence of the lake house wasn't peaceful anymore. It was deafening. It was the silence before a storm. I spent the next 48 hours in a fog of denial, trying to rewind the tape of our lives and find the moment my sister had become this stranger. She can't be serious. She's just stressed. Maybe the city job isn't going well. Maybe she's having a breakdown. I tried to rationalize, to justify her demand. We were family. Blood was thicker than water. That's what Dad always said. But every time I replayed her words, "I want my inheritance, Audrey," the manipulative sweetness of her voice was overshadowed by the cold, steel edge of entitlement. It wasn't a plea. It was a hostile takeover attempt disguised as an ultimatum. My first instinct was to seek professional reassurance. I called Mr. Thompson, the family lawyer. He was a kind, older man who had drafted Dad's will, and knew the family dynamic well enough. I outlined Sloan's demand and her suggestion of a trade. "Mr. Thompson, I just need to know. The will is legally sound, correct? She can't force me to sell." He chuckled, a dry, tired sound. "Audrey, your father's will is a fortress. It is explicit. The lake house is yours, free and clear. Sloan was provided for handsomely, I might add. She has no legal grounds to demand that property." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. "However," he continued, his tone turning serious, "legal grounds don't stop a desperate person from being a nuisance. She can hire lawyers and tie this up in court for years. It's a war of attrition. You have the house, yes, but fighting her will mean draining your liquid inheritance and incurring massive legal fees. She knows you don't have the deep pockets she pretends to have." His words struck a nerve. Sloan knew exactly how much cash Dad had left me. She was leveraging her perceived financial status, her city life, her expensive fiancé, to threaten me with a drawn-out, pointless legal fight that would force me to sell the house just to pay the bills. The house wouldn't be stolen. It would be poisoned. This wasn't about fairness. It was about cruelty. My confusion finally broke, replaced by a cold, protective resolve. I was no longer fighting my sister. I was fighting an entitled enemy trying to dismantle my father's final act of love and respect. I told Mr. Thompson I'd handle it, but I wouldn't be bullied. I realized right then that the solution wouldn't be found in a courtroom. It had to be strategic, psychological, and entirely unexpected. Sloan didn't wait for my response. She escalated quickly. She flew up the following weekend, bringing her fiancé David in tow. This wasn't a casual visit. It was a high-pressure inspection designed to make me feel small. David was exactly what you'd expect. Tailored suit, expensive watch, polite but empty eyes. He was part of the performance. Audrey, buddy, David said, offering a firm, meaningless handshake. Charming place. Very rustic. Rustic. The word felt like a judgment. Sloane glided through the rooms, pointing out everything that was wrong. It's charming, Audrey, I'll grant you that, but look at the foundation. Dad always worried about the foundation. And the roof. You're going to need a full overhaul in the next 2 years. Do you even have a line of credit that large? This place is a maintenance nightmare. She was playing the part of the concerned, financially savvy older sister, but her eyes, when David wasn't looking, held a distinct, hungry glint. She wasn't warning me. She was depreciating the value of my asset, trying to wear me down psychologically. I've already started budgeting for the minor repairs, Sloane, I said calmly, deliberately using the word minor. I actually find the maintenance peaceful. It keeps me busy. Oh, darling, you and your little projects, she cooed, touching my arm with a pitying hand. You deserve better than projects. You deserve stability. David and I, we could handle this place. We could turn it into a high-end retreat. That's what Dad really would have wanted, to see the value maximized. Think of the legacy. I nodded slowly, letting her believe her performance was working. But inside, I was watching her like a forensic investigator. Every subtle dig, every calculated touch, every mention of legacy only fueled my determination. She was so focused on pressuring me that she failed to see me observing her own fragile foundation. I decided to stop fighting her on her terms and start investigating her on mine. If the stakes were this high for her to discard family loyalty, the reason had to be far deeper than just wanting a summer home. It had to be desperation. My investigation started simply. Social media. Sloane's Instagram was a highlight reel of perfection. Designer bags, 5-star resorts, and endless celebratory dinners with David. The captions were always about hustle, success, and manifesting wealth. It was a classic projection of an aspirational life, but something felt manufactured. The smiles were too wide, the filters too thick. I shifted to less glamorous platforms. I found her on a professional networking site and noted the company she and David supposedly ran. A boutique investment consultancy. It had a sleek website but suspiciously few employees listed beyond the partners. Next, I moved to public records. This is where the curtain truly began to peel back. I started by searching for liens against her former property and her current residence. I found nothing on her small previous condo, but a deeper search revealed something concerning about her current lavish apartment, which she constantly called ours. It wasn't hers. It was an expensive long-term rental, disguised with furniture financed by a high-interest consumer credit line. She was sinking thousands a month into rent and interest just to maintain the image. Then I checked the business. Her consultancy was registered as a limited liability company, LLC, but had a complex, confusing corporate structure, with rapid changes in funding rounds. Digging through property records related to the LLC, I found the first major smoking gun. A massive bridge loan taken out 6 months before Dad passed away. The bridge loan was enormous, 7 figures. The purpose listed was expansion capital, but the interest rate was crippling. And crucially, I found a secondary non-public document detailing the collateral needed to secure an extension on that loan, which was coming due in just under 2 months. The collateral specified was a fully transferable unencumbered real property asset valued at minimum $X, where $X was a figure slightly above the lake house's appraised value. It hit me like a physical blow. Sloane didn't want the lake house to use as a retreat. She needed it as collateral to prevent her entire, over-leveraged life from collapsing. The whole empire, the fake business, the rented apartment, the oblivious fiancé David, was a house of cards, and the lake house was the only brick left to hold it up. Her 60-40 cash inheritance was gone, swallowed by initial loan payments or invested into the failing business. Her demands weren't born of simple greed. They were born of existential financial panic. If that loan defaulted, Sloane would face bankruptcy, potential lawsuits from David and other partners she had deceived, and total public ruin. The fight was no longer about a slight. It was about a desperate, cynical attempt to sacrifice me and my father's memory to save herself from the consequences of her own fraudulent lifestyle. Sitting there with the legal documents, the financial records, and the glossy fake social media posts all spread out, my last vestiges of brotherly sentiment vanished. Sloane had made her choice. She chose deceit over decency, and self-preservation over family. The rage I felt was no longer hot and blinding. It was cold, clear, and focused. I realized that giving her the shock of her life couldn't just be about winning the house. It had to be about exposing the truth she worked so hard to conceal. I had to let her believe she was close to winning. I had to let her invest her final desperate hope in that lake house, only to pull the rug out at the precise moment her public reputation and her future were tied to its acquisition. The target wasn't the house. The target was her carefully constructed facade. My own plan began to form, meticulous and slow, like the chilling movement of a glacier. I knew what I needed. A legal trap that Mr. Thompson himself hadn't considered, combined with the undeniable financial proof that would destroy her credibility entirely. I was ready to play her game, and I would be using her own ruthless entitlement as the main ingredient for her downfall. I picked up my phone and sent Sloane a short, carefully worded text, designed to look like a capitulation. Fine, Sloane. Let's talk about terms. I'll sell you the house, but we'll do it publicly and formally. Call me tomorrow. The bait was set. She took it instantly. Sloane took the bait instantly. Her response to my text. Fine, Sloane. Let's talk about terms. I'll sell you the house, but we'll do it publicly and formally. Call me tomorrow. Was a frantic barrage of emojis and exclamation points. She thought she had won through sheer force of will, and a thinly veiled threat of legal ruin. She had no idea she had just signed the first contract of her own destruction. My decision to fight wasn't just about the money or the lake house anymore. It was personal. It was fueled by the cold, irrefutable evidence of her impending financial ruin. But the revenge plan needed to be more than just a financial counterstrike. It had to be a moral defeat. Sloane didn't just want the house. She wanted to erase the memory of me and Dad's final years together. I was searching through Dad's old mahogany desk, something I had avoided since the funeral, when I found a hidden compartment. Inside was a small leather-bound journal. Not a diary, but a ledger of sentiments, where Dad would record meaningful moments and reflections. I hadn't expected to find anything about Sloane, but I needed to know the depth of her callousness. On the last full page, dated 2 months before his death, Dad's handwriting was shaky, but the words were heartbreakingly clear. Spoke to Sloane today. She was asking again about the antique timepiece. She wants to appraise it for insurance. I know what that means. She sees everything as a transaction. I told her it stays here with the house until the end. She sighed an audible, irritated sigh over the phone and said, Honestly, Dad, you can be so sentimental. Just cash out. It wasn't the words but the tone. The contempt. It hurts more than the disease. She only sees the $sign. I hope Audrey understands. The antique timepiece. A Patek Philippe watch, a family heirloom that had been passed down 3 generations, which Dad had explicitly left to me in a specific addendum to the will. Sloane had called me shortly after his death, asking if I had found any vintage junk that wasn't listed in the main inventory. I hadn't connected the dots until this moment. She wasn't just greedy now. She was actively trying to liquidate my father's emotional legacy, even while he was dying. That journal entry was my midpoint twist. It was the moment the scale of the fight irrevocably tipped from defense to vengeance. The issue was no longer a house. It was a direct act of contempt against the man who loved us both. She wanted to sell his sentimentality to save her own leveraged facade. The rage was no longer cold. It was white-hot but perfectly controlled. I wasn't going to just win. I was going to make sure that the truth of her heartless ambition, was the instrument of her undoing. When Sloane called the next day, her tone was all business, arrogant, triumphant business. Okay, Audrey. Let's be efficient. My lawyer will draw up the papers. I'll wire you the cash. We can close in 2 weeks. Hold on, Sloan. This is a massive property transfer, I countered, sounding nervous and slightly overwhelmed, exactly the demeanor she expected. I want it done right. I want a formal public closing. I want our lawyer Thompson there. I want a signing party, actually. Let's make a big deal of it. After all, it's Dad's legacy, right? Let's have a final family luncheon at the house. She hesitated, clearly annoyed by the delay and the formality, but ultimately she loved the idea of a public victory. A party where she could parade her perfect fiancé, David, and announce her new status as the owner of the grand family house. A luncheon. Fine, she conceded, a predatory purr in her voice. But the closing date is firm. 3 weeks from today. That's the absolute latest I can wait. 3 weeks. That was the window I needed. The bridge loan collateral deadline I found in Act 2 was 6 weeks away, but her public commitment to securing this house now was critical for the bank's faith in her extension. She would rush everything, believing the house was hers, and that was her fatal mistake. My plan solidified into a 3-pronged attack. 1. The legal lure. Use the delay to execute the final devastating legal maneuver that she would never see coming. 2. The public exposure. Ensure the closing luncheon was attended not just by family and lawyers, but by at least one key person whose opinion mattered to her. David, her business partner, or the bank representative, to maximize the reputational damage. 3. The proof. Prepare the physical and digital evidence, the financial fraud documents, the social media facade, and Dad's journal entry, to be revealed in rapid, undeniable succession. My true leverage lay not in fighting the will, but in a clause within the will that Mr. Thompson himself had only briefly mentioned as a just-in-case provision, one that our father had insisted upon after a distant family scandal decades ago. I went back to Mr. Thompson, but I didn't tell him I was selling. I asked him a hypothetical question, a legal puzzle about the will's structure. Mr. Thompson, hypothetically, if the primary heir me, decided that the property should be protected from a forced sale or future speculative development, what legal mechanism would Dad's will allow? Thompson frowned, pulling out his dusty copy of the estate documents. Ah yes, the contingency trust. Your father was prescient. He included an extremely rare, almost archaic clause, a conditional loyalty transfer clause. He explained the loophole, and my heart hammered in my chest. The clause stipulated that if the property ever came under threat from a malicious internal claim, proven to be solely for personal financial gain and not for the benefit of the legacy, the house would automatically be transferred out of my personal name and into a specialized entity called the Lake Serenity Family Legacy Trust, LFLT. Crucially, this transfer could be triggered by the executor, Thompson, upon the presentation of demonstrable evidence of malicious intent by the claimant, Sloan. The trust's bylaws were lethal. The house cannot be sold, mortgaged, or used as collateral. The trust's sole beneficiary is me, but I am legally bound to maintain it as a family retreat or donate its usage to a non-profit, e.g., a local children's camp, for 8 months of the year. The trust is legally recognized as a new, separate legal entity, making any prior contract of sale null, and void the moment the transfer is officially executed. The beauty of the plan was this. Sloan thought she was negotiating to buy the house from Audrey, the individual. My revenge was to let her sign a massive, binding contract of sale, the cornerstone of her collateral extension, with Audrey, only to reveal moments later that Audrey no longer owned the house. The house now belonged to a legal entity that was designed specifically to thwart her self-serving mercenary goals. She would have publicly committed to a massive financial transaction for an asset that became legally untouchable the second she made her claim. Thompson was nervous but fascinated. He confirmed that the evidence of her manipulation and the desperate need for collateral, which I had gathered in Act 2, constituted the malicious intent needed to trigger the trust. It's a nuclear option, Audrey. You'd be destroying her entire facade, Thompson warned. She forced my hand, Mr. Thompson. She forced me to choose between protecting Dad's legacy and protecting a sister who was willing to sell his memory for a loan extension. I choose Dad. I left Thompson's office with a renewed sense of purpose. I had the legal mechanism. I had the damning financial proof. All I needed now was the perfect stage, the family luncheon, to deliver the public spectacular shock that would not only protect the lake house but utterly shatter the manipulative life Sloane had built on lies. The countdown to the climax had begun. Sloane, intoxicated by her perceived victory, was unbearable. Once I agreed to sell, she dropped the saccharine sweetness and replaced it with brazen, entitled arrogance. She genuinely believed that she had intimidated the quiet, non-confrontational brother into submission. The 3-week countdown to the luncheon became a pressure cooker, designed to test my resolve. But every condescending phone call, every gloating text, was simply more fuel for the fire I was preparing to ignite beneath her world. Sloane treated the lake house as if it were already her property, even before a contract was signed. She started sending me links to architectural firms specializing in modern waterfront redesigns. "Audrey, the house is so dated," she texted, sending a photo of an all-white glass monstrosity. "I'm thinking we knock down the entire south wall and put in panoramic windows. It's going to be impossible to collaterize it looking like a fisherman's shack. I've already contacted the appraisers for the post-renovation value." Post-renovation value. She wasn't just planning to change the house. She was planning to erase it, to bulldoze every memory Dad and I had built together. This wasn't an investment. It was an act of architectural contempt. She started publicly gossiping to our few remaining mutual acquaintances. The stories came back to me twisted and poisoned. "Poor Audrey just couldn't handle the financial reality of the estate," she'd say. "He's so sweet, but he's simply not cut out for that kind of responsibility. I'm rescuing the property for the family legacy." The dramatic irony was delicious. She was building her victory monument on quicksand, proclaiming her success to the world, only increasing the volume of the eventual crash. I just had to keep nodding, keeping my voice low and my eyes averted, playing the part of the defeated loser. "Yes, Sloane. That sounds ambitious," I'd reply, letting her read my hesitancy as resignation, not meticulous calculation. While Sloane was focused on granite countertops and infinity pools, I was finalizing the kill switch. The conditional loyalty transfer into the Lake Serenity Family Legacy Trust, LFLT, was my ultimate weapon. I met Mr. Thompson at his office 2 weeks before the closing date. He looked drawn, nervous. "Audrey, are you absolutely certain about this?" he asked, pushing a sheaf of crisp documents toward me. "Once these are triggered, the house is legally untouchable. Sloane will lose everything, including her standing with her fiancé and her business partners. This is total scorched earth." "She started it, Mr. Thompson," I reminded him, my voice firm. She looked me in the eye, knowing Dad trusted me, and demanded I dismantle his final gift to save her from a bankruptcy she earned through fraud. She showed contempt for my father's dying wishes. "The trust is exactly what Dad intended for a situation like this. Protection against an internal claim for pure financial gain. I'm simply enforcing the spirit of the will." Thompson signed the final preparation documents. We established the precise moment of execution, immediately following the signing of the agreement of sale, but before any funds were transferred. I would hand Thompson the notarized evidence of Sloane's financial duplicity and malicious intent, the digital documents and Dad's journal excerpt, at the lunch, and he would verbally confirm the trust transfer, rendering the sale agreement void ab initio, void from the beginning. The house would technically be mine for the signing, then transferred to the trust, making her contract worthless, her collateral promise broken, and her fraud exposed, all in one stunning legal maneuver. It was perfect. The next step was ensuring the public exposure hit with maximum force. I transferred all the financial documents I had uncovered, the crippling bridge loan, the collateral extension clauses, the expensive furniture financing, the fake company registration details, into a single secure file on a tablet. I meticulously organized the screenshots of her social media posts, juxtaposing the fabricated wealth with the harsh financial realities. This was the proof she couldn't argue away. The key to her total destruction wasn't just the house. It was David, her fiancé. Sloane used David's assumed wealth and stability as part of her facade. If David left, her whole social and financial structure crumbled. I reached out to David via email, careful to keep the tone neutral and slightly distressed. David, Sloane and I are finalizing the sale of the lake house this Saturday. I know you and Sloane have big plans for the property, and it would mean a lot to the family if you could be there for the official transfer. It's a bittersweet moment, but I want to ensure it's done right. He replied promptly, agreeing to attend. He saw it as a victory celebration. I saw him as the key witness, the first person who needed to see his soon-to-be wife for the desperate fraudster she was. 2 days before the luncheon, Sloane and David showed up unannounced with a contractor, ostensibly to take final measurements. This was her last psychological attack, designed to rub salt in the wound. I watched silently as Sloane walked the contractor through the living room. Tear out that old fireplace, it's hideous. And the kitchen, the whole thing goes. Audrey, darling, you can take these old cabinets if you want them, but honestly, they belong in a dumpster. She was dismantling the house in front of me, piece by piece. David smiled awkwardly, sensing my discomfort, but Sloane was relentless. Look at this little porch, David, she said, gesturing to the screened-in area where Dad and I used to sit every evening. We'll enclose this. It's dead space. Absolutely dead. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I maintained the mask of resignation. I forced a slight shrug. Whatever you decide, Sloane. It'll be your house soon. She beamed, mistaking my quiet control for broken spirit. I knew you'd see sense, Audrey. You're such a good, kind brother. You're doing the right thing for the family, letting us take the burden of this place. She hugged me, a tight, triumphant embrace that felt like a chokehold. Good brother. Right thing. She was feeding my narrative perfectly, cementing the public perception that I was weak and she was the superior, sensible one. I watched them drive away, leaving behind their smug confidence and the faint smell of expensive cologne. In 2 days, that confidence would become her cage. I double-checked the LFLT documents, confirmed Mr. Thompson's attendance, and placed the evidence tablet in the kitchen drawer. The stage was set. The bomb was ticking. And soon Sloane would find out that the greatest shock of her life wasn't the loss of the house, but the total public demolition of the person she pretended to be. The day of the closing luncheon dawned brilliant and unforgiving. The sun sparkled off Lake Serenity, creating a deceptively idyllic scene. The scent of pine and fresh-cut grass hung in the air, a final cruel contrast to the venom that was about to be unleashed inside. I stood on the porch watching the cars arrive. Sloane, of course, was the centerpiece, wearing an immaculate white linen dress, the color of purity and new beginnings, a color utterly undeserved. Her fiancé, David, trailed her, looking prosperous and slightly bored. The legal team consisted of Mr. Thompson, looking grimly determined, and Sloane's own sleek, expensive corporate attorney, who carried the air of a man who dealt exclusively in victories. The dining room table, where Dad always insisted on carving the Thanksgiving turkey, was now covered in contracts, pens, and notepads. It was sterile, professional, and utterly devoid of family warmth. Sloane was in full performance mode. She hugged me with exaggerated pity. Oh, Audrey, you look tired. Don't worry, once this is done, you can finally relax. We'll make sure you're taken care of. I gave her the weak, overwhelmed nod she expected. My entire body felt like a coil of piano wire, wound taut and vibrating with suppressed energy. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head. The calm delivery, the methodical destruction, the final surgical cut. The key was to ensure Sloane's triumph was absolute before the fall. The higher she soared, the farther she would crash. Lunch was a tense, manufactured affair. Sloane controlled the conversation, talking only of her glorious future plans for the house. We're calling the renovation the Phoenix Project, she announced brightly to the table, her eyes constantly flicking to David for affirmation. We'll tear down everything that's old and build something worthy of the view. We're thinking of hosting our engagement party here, once it's finished, of course. Audrey, you'll be invited. As a guest, naturally. Her lawyer passed the final purchase agreement across the table. It was thick, dense, and full of legalese, detailing the immediate transfer of the lake house title in exchange for the large cash sum. Sloane pushed the tablet of documents toward David with a triumphant smirk. "Look at that, darling. Our future. All clean, clear title, transferred from little Audrey to us." Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, his expression unreadable. "If everyone is satisfied with the final language, we can proceed to the signing. Audrey, you first as the seller, to confirm your intent to transfer the deed." Picked up the pen. My hand was steady. I signed my name clearly on the line, officially agreeing to sell the home that was my father's legacy to the woman who wanted to use it as collateral for a massive fraudulent loan. As I handed the pen to Sloane, she didn't even look at me. Her face was set in a mask of victorious entitlement. "Finally," she whispered, mostly to herself. She paused, hovering the pen over the paper, savoring the moment. And then she seized the spotlight one last time. "Before I make this official," she said, beaming at David and her lawyer, "I just want to thank my brother. Audrey, you've been difficult. But in the end you did the right thing. You realized that this house was too big a burden for you. You don't have the vision, the resources, or frankly, the maturity to handle a property of this scale. David and I are saving this legacy. Dad would be proud to see the value maximized, not sitting here collecting dust and decay." She punctuated the speech with a flourish, driving the pen down hard, signing her name on the final line. It was done. In her mind she had won. Her future, her loan, her reputation, all secured by this signature. I pushed back my chair slowly, deliberately. The scrape of wood on the floor was the loudest sound in the room. "Before Mr. Thompson countersigns, Sloane," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the triumphant silence, "there's a small matter of due diligence. Since we're all here talking about maturity and legacy, I think we should clarify exactly why this sale is so urgent for you." Sloane laughed, a brittle, dismissive sound. "Oh, Audrey, don't start with your drama. It's finished. Sign, Mr. Thompson." Mr. Thompson did not move. He kept his hands folded, watching me. I pulled out the tablet from my side bag and placed it squarely in the middle of the table, turning the screen toward David. "Sloane, you spoke about resources and maximizing value," I continued, ignoring her rising panic. "But you didn't need this house for a retreat. You needed it because you're 6 weeks away from insolvency." Sloane's face went white. "What are you talking about?" "David, don't listen to him, he's unstable. I'm talking about the $7.4 million bridge loan your LLC, Serenity Coast Consultants, took out 8 months ago," I said, my voice gaining strength. "A loan that is currently delinquent, charging 22% interest, and demanding immediate collateralization." I tapped the screen, displaying the legal documents I had uncovered. "Here is the extension request you filed last week, Sloane. It specifically lists the Lake Serenity property, 100% unencumbered title, as the non-negotiable collateral required to avoid total default, legal action, and potential bankruptcy. David, your fiancé, the man you claim is your business partner, is listed nowhere on these liability documents." Sloane took this loan out and leveraged her entire professional life, and she was about to use a fraudulent property transfer to save herself. David stared at the screen, then at Sloane, his expensive composure cracking instantly. "What the hell is this, Sloane? We were supposed to be securing our next round of funding, not covering a massive silent debt. Is this why you were pushing so hard?" Sloane was frantic, stumbling over her words. "It's a temporary liquidity issue. Audrey is lying. He's just upset about the sale." I didn't give her time to recover. I slipped the tablet away and replaced it with the worn, leather-bound journal. The mood in the room shifted from shock to icy judgment. I was willing to believe it was just desperation, Sloane. Just greed. But then I found this. This isn't about money. This is about disrespecting the man who gave us everything. The man you just used his memory to justify your actions. I opened the journal to the shaky last entry and began to read aloud, slowly, deliberately. "Spoke to Sloane today. She was asking again about the antique timepiece. She wants to appraise it for insurance. I know what that means. She sees everything as a transaction. She sighed an audible, irritated sigh over the phone and said, "Honestly, Dad, you can be so sentimental. Just cash out." It wasn't the words but the tone. The contempt. It hurts more than the disease. She only sees the dollar sign. I closed the journal. The silence was absolute. David looked ill. Mr. Thompson finally spoke, his voice heavy with disappointment. "That journal, Mrs. Holloway, along with the irrefutable financial documentation presented by Audrey, establishes a clear pattern of malicious internal claim for personal financial gain and a profound disregard for the explicit wishes and sentiments of the testator." He turned to the contracts on the table, pointing to Sloane's signature. "Sloane, you just spoke about doing the right thing for the family legacy. You just signed an agreement to purchase this property from your brother, Audrey. Congratulations on demonstrating the intent to acquire the house solely for mercenary purposes, exploiting your siblings' presumed weakness." Sloane's eyes widened, finally realizing the trap was sprung. She lunged for the contract, but Mr. Thompson placed a hand over it. "Unfortunately, Mrs. Holloway, in your haste and your arrogance, you failed to read one small, extremely rare clause that your father insisted upon, the conditional loyalty transfer clause." Thompson took a pre-signed, notarized document from his briefcase. "As the executor of the estate, based on the documented evidence of malicious intent presented by Audrey, evidence fully confirmed by the facts of your debt and your contempt for the deceased's wishes, I am legally obligated to initiate this transfer. The lake house cannot be used as a commodity to bail out financial recklessness." He then delivered the final devastating blow, his voice ringing with legal finality. "Effective 1 minute ago, upon the public signing of this predatory purchase agreement, the lake house has been legally removed from Audrey's personal possession. It is now the sole property of the Lake Serenity Family Legacy Trust, LFLT." He pushed the trust documents toward her. "The bylaws of this trust explicitly forbid the sale, mortgage, or collateralization of the property forever. Furthermore, the trust is not legally obligated to honor any contract signed by the previous individual owner, particularly one executed under demonstrably malicious pretense." He tapped the voided sale contract. "Your signature is on a document for an asset that, at the moment of your final flourish, was transferred into an unassailable entity designed by your own father to thwart exactly this kind of predatory action. The contract is void. The house is untouchable. You have just publicly committed fraud and destroyed your reputation for a property you can never possess." The air left Sloane's body. The victory white of her dress suddenly looked ridiculous. She didn't scream, she deflated. The shock wasn't just losing the house. It was the realization that her father had foreseen her greed, and that her weak little brother had played a patient, brilliant long game. Then came the fury. "You son of a bitch!" she shrieked, slamming her hand down on the table, scattering pens. "You planned this. This is disgusting. You're framing me. You don't care about Dad. You just want to hoard everything for yourself." She turned on David, whose face was a mixture of disgust and professional panic. "David, tell them. This is a setup. We need that house." David simply shook his head, looking down at the tablet with the financial evidence. "I'm not covering $7.4 million in fraudulent debt, Sloane. Not for a house that isn't even for sale. I'm out. You know where to send my company's legal fees." He straightened his suit, offered a polite but cold nod to Mr. Thompson, and walked out without a backward glance. Sloane crumpled. The facade had shattered. Her corporate lawyer, seeing the irrefutable evidence and the legally impenetrable trust document, wisely packed his bag without a word and followed David. She was left alone at the head of the table, sobbing, defeated. "You think you won, Audrey? You think you're better than me? I'll ruin you. I'll expose that you're just a failure living in the past." I simply looked at her, the quiet winner, standing in the home I had just permanently protected. "The past is where Dad is, Sloane," I said softly. "And he left the house to someone who would protect his memory. You just proved him right. The inheritance wasn't the house, Sloane. The inheritance was the peace of mind knowing who I could trust." And you just gave me the final piece of evidence I needed. I looked at Mr. Thompson. I think we're done here, Mr. Thompson. Please secure the trust documents. The house is officially safe. Sloane was left weeping onto the voided contract, the pen she had used to sign her victory now resting on the documents of her utter defeat. The shock was complete. The aftermath of the luncheon was a silence so profound it felt like the house itself was sighing in relief. Sloane's sobs eventually died down, replaced by a bitter, defeated silence. She packed her purse, avoiding eye contact with the remnants of her shattered contract, and walked out of the lake house for the last time. She never looked back. The immediate weeks were consumed by legal technicalities. Mr. Thompson efficiently filed the documents confirming the Lake Serenity Family Legacy Trust, LFLT, officially securing the house against any future claims, even my own. The house was now protected by an ironclad structure, just as Dad had intended. I remained the primary, non-remunerated custodian, legally bound to ensure its maintenance and uphold the terms that would eventually dedicate its use to local nonprofits during the off-season. The fallout on Sloane's side was swift and total. David, her fiancé, had clearly communicated with her business contacts. The exposure of the fraudulent collateral attempt and the delinquency on the $7.4 million loan led to an immediate call from the bank. Without the house, she had no leverage. Her LLC, Serenity Coast Consultants, folded within a month. The bankruptcy was public, painful, and total. I heard the rumors filtering through mutual acquaintances. Sloane had moved out of her expensive condo, her credit score was ruined, and she was forced to take a humiliating entry-level job. She was no longer the golden child, the successful socialite, or the confident heiress in waiting. She was simply the woman who tried to steal her dying father's legacy and failed spectacularly. I felt no euphoria, only a deep, exhausting sadness. Winning felt less like triumph and more like the end of a long, painful surgery. I had protected the house, but I had lost the idea of my sister forever. 3 months after the closing, as the autumn turned crisp and the lake house was finally, truly mine and the trust's, I received one final communication. It wasn't a phone call, which I would have ignored, but a bitter, rambling email. Subject: you win. Ari, I hope you're happy sitting there in that dusty old cabin, feeling like a big hero. You didn't win, you cheated. You used some obscure technicality to destroy my life, my future with David, and my business. You're a sociopath. You think Dad would be proud of you for ruining your own sister? You only did this because you couldn't stand that I was successful and you were always the weak one, the one Dad only kept around because he was sick. You think I'm the greedy one? You're the hoarder. You're the one who clings to the past. Enjoy your life alone with your memories and your stupid trust. I hope it brings you peace. 'Cause you sure took mine. Sloane. I read the email twice. It was the expected blend of self-pity and victim-blaming, a perfect reflection of the entitled person she had always been. It confirmed that she had learned nothing. She still didn't see the theft. She only saw the loss. She didn't acknowledge the contempt she showed Dad. She only focused on her financial ruin. I didn't reply. I didn't save the email. I simply hit delete. That action, more than the legal documents or the signed trust, was the true final act of my revenge. It was the complete and final emotional break. I had excised the rot from my life. I walked out to the dock that evening, watching the sunset bleed across the water. The lake house was quiet, solid, and entirely safe. I realized then that the true shock I gave Sloane wasn't the loss of the collateral or the public humiliation. The shock was the realization that I was no longer the weak, easily manipulated little brother she remembered. The shock was watching her entire, carefully constructed world, built on lies, greed, and the casual disrespect of family, collapse because of a contingency plan written by the very man she scorned. In the end, this wasn't just a story about money. This was about integrity. Money doesn't create character. It simply acts as a powerful solvent, revealing the true substance underneath. Sloane's inheritance revealed her as a mercenary. My inheritance, the house, the legacy, and the trust that came with it, forced me to confront who I was and fight for what was right. The most valuable thing my father left me wasn't the deed to the property. It was the mechanism to defend it. She wanted a shock? She got it. And I finally understood that sometimes, letting go of family is the only way to truly keep the legacy and the peace of the family you once had. My world was quieter now, and though it hurt, it was finally honest. I was safe. And the lake house was free.